This conference will now be recorded.
And you can adjust the height by adjusting screws here. You can actually raise the lens up and down. It's all very crude, but it does work. I've been using it for now 2 or 3 years. It doesn't have much in the way of autofocus. Autofocus is this little knob here where you move the lens front and back, and you focus in on the glass screen at the back here. You look at this screen you put a cloth over the top of your head, and you look at the image. The image will be upside down and back to front. And it takes a while to get used to seeing an image this way, upside down and back to front. But once you understand how it works, you can adjust to it quite easily. But I've got a couple of presentations and some PowerPoints I wanted to show to everybody. So if I move over to showing sharing my screen, I'll show you a couple of PowerPoints. Right. This here is PowerPoint, just to show who I am, and let's bear a second minutes. Right, this is me. I've got a BA Hons. I'm an associate at the Royal Photographic Society, and in the corner here you see a little image of my camera. So right. I started my working life some 40 odd years ago as an apprentice camera operator at a busy London book printers. And I was using a Little John gallery camera. Now, gallery camera is about 30, 40 feet long. They're huge, great big beasts, and you use them for photographing artwork. And one end is outside where you put the copy on the copy board, and the other end is actually inside the darkroom. So I did this for many years as an apprentice, working a lot of actually in darkrooms, doing a lot of what people would now describe as what you use in Photoshop, dodging and burning, editing images, learning how to retouch an image, not using Photoshop, but using chemicals or dodging and burning. This is how it was done before Photoshop arrived. And then over the years, the cameras, these gallery cameras, got smaller. This is the type of camera I've been using. And then eventually, over a few years, I then retrained to be a cross-field drum scanner. This is the scanner which I was using, where you mount your photographs or your transparencies, most transparencies, onto a large drum. It would spin at high speed. And then using the keyboard you see in the front here, you would put in your various settings, your start and end parameters, then your resolution, adjusting the colors, your highlight and shadow, adjusting your curves. It was quite a technical job to do, and I did it for some 25, 30 years. And I think conservatively, I did probably around about 400,000 scans in my working life as a cross-field scanner operator. And then after that, I slowly moved into working with digital imaging, working with digital artworks, Photoshop, and all the rest of the other sort of programs you associate with desktop publishing. Then in 2015, I got thoroughly fed up with working in the print industry, so I decided I wanted to get out. So at the tender age of 54, I handed my notice in and went to university to study for a degree of photography. And I went to the University of East London, which is in the London Docks. If anybody who's taken off, flown from London City Airport, you'll see the very strange, unusual building across the other side of the dock. That's the university I went to. It's a very good university for the arts, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. And so I graduated in 2017 with BA Hons, and then I submitted all my degree portfolio to the Royal Photographic Society, and they gave me an associate membership, which is on a par with a master's. Next, if I've been thinking about doing going for the fellowship next, but that will be on a par with a PhD. But I'll do that one day, but not just now. But it was during my time as a second year undergraduate that it was pure chance that I had an exhibition in the Science Museum. And it was after this lecture in the Science Museum, I was wandering around and there was an exhibition of a Victorian photographer called Julia Margaret Cameron. And so I went and had a look at what the exhibition was all about. And I saw her photographs, her lenses, her plates, her prints. And I suddenly there and then knew exactly what I wanted to do for my final year project. I suddenly realized that all this process I was well capable of. It wasn't that difficult. Some of the processes weren't that difficult to what I was doing as an apprentice some 35 odd years ago. So I started to learn how to do this. Somebody taught me the very basics of how to do the process, and then after that it was teaching myself. It's a very simple process to do, this wet collodion, but a lot of things go wrong with it. I can probably teach anybody how to do it, the basics, in about 5 minutes, but you probably take you about a year, 18 months to learn all the things which go wrong. That is the hardest part about it, is knowing all the pitfalls of what happens and where you're going to go wrong. So these are some of Julia Margaret Cameron's famous photographs. This is John Herschel, it's Charles Darwin, Alfred Lord Tennyson. Julia Margaret Cameron was well connected in the Victorian era. She knew all the movers and shakers. She was well connected to a lot of the leading artists at the time. So she was a rich woman, and she was able to do this this hobby, as it were. She was able to spend some time. It was only the rich who were able to partake of this because the cameras were expensive and the chemicals were expensive. But the most difficult chemical to get hold of was pure water. It's one of the most important things you would do in this process is actually the water has got to be extremely pure when you're mixing it up to make one of the solutions called silver nitrate. Anyway, so while I was doing my project, as I needed a camera, so I decided to make my own camera. These are a few photographs of me actually making my camera over a period of 2 months. And I got the plans off the internet, and then I got various other parts of the internet, from B&Q, from eBay. I sourced the lens, it came from Japan. It's a Fuji, my first lens was a Fuji 300mm lens from Japan. And I've now got 2 lenses, a 300 and a 180. I much prefer using the 180 now. A 180mm lens is equivalent to about a 28mm lens on a 35mm camera. It all changes. The bigger the lens, the bigger the camera you go, the bigger the lenses. They go up from the difference between a 35mm camera and what I'm using, which is a 10.8. If you have a 300mm lens and you divide it by 6, you get the rough equivalent of what the lens would be for a 35mm camera. So these are photographs, some of the photographs I had making my camera one summer. And this is the first ever shoot which I did with this camera, and it was my mother-in-law in the back garden. And you can see here in this tray here, photograph of the plate as it's actually fixing. It's actually developing. And so I started to, as I went along, started to get better at doing what I was doing, and I started photographing a few people. The woman on the left is one of my tutors at university. She's a Greek woman called Antigone. I got on very well with her, and she quite kindly sat for me one day, and I think she was very pleased with this photograph of her. And she sent, I made a print of it and he sent it home to a mum. The picture in the center here of this young girl, this is a girl called Emma, and she was one of my classmates who kindly sat for me. She's a pretty girl who has this very eclectic hairstyle, looks a bit like a bird's nest, and it didn't matter whatever she was wearing, she always looked $1 million. So one day she sat for me. This is actually, I took this photograph here, and she was sitting on the edge of the Royal Albert Docks outside the library at university. So it was a very sunny day, and I did a side portrait of her, just showing her profile and her hairstyle. And I don't know if you see, if I can move my mouse here, you can see where I'm showing here, there's this very small area here. It looks a bit like a tear. Now that's not a tear, that's actually a mark in the emulsion. When you make these plates, you start off with a sheet of glass, or I've now moved away from using glass, now using perspex or plastic. And when you mix the chemical, you coat the plate with this chemical. The first chemical is called collodion, and you coat it by hand. It's probably the hardest process in the whole process to do. And as you're coating it, sometimes all sorts of bits of muck and debris, dust, float down. And what's happened here is a little bit of dust, a little bit of I don't know, a bit of muck floated and landed in the emulsion, and that's what you can actually see there in the photograph. Now, I've entered this photograph into a number of big international competitions, and was a finalist in 2 very big worldwide competitions for Royal Photographic Society and also for Association of Photographers. And I now use this image as for my business cards. The guy on the top right, he's a friend of mine called Bill. He just turned up one day and I just did his portrait. And this was while I was still learning how to do the process. I've known him, Bill, for a long time, and he's a fellow camera enthusiast. He was very keen to see how it went. So as I went along, I started trying out different chemistry, different ways to make a photograph. A lot of what you do is the actual chemistry itself and how you coat the plate and how you make it, as it is as important as actually the photograph itself. You have here 2 photographs of 2 different scenes. They're exactly the same scene, but I was using 2 different collodion solutions. The one on the left is called Po' Boy, and the one on the right is called Lee's Landscape. And you can see from the 2 photographs, you get quite different photographs. The collodion solutions, some of them are more sensitive to some wavelengths, some colors than others. And if you look at the flowers on the actual table, you can see they were all 4 different colored flowers. And it comes out better in some photographs than others. You have to use your different collodion solutions you have to think about what solution you're going to use for each different type of photograph. The Po' Boy is the one I probably use the most. It's the most forgiving and most easy to use. They all have their certain problems in use, but Po' Boy's, it has the least dangerous chemicals in it. It doesn't have any of the nasty toxic metals such as cadmium in it, and it's the only chemical which a lot of the universities and places such as the Victoria and Albert Museum will allow on their premises. So I play around a lot with chemicals and actually the process of making a photograph. So these, moving on through here, these are some more of the photographs which I did for my degree portfolio. I was doing a series of portraits of women or middle-aged women, and they all had a connection somewhere along the line with the WI. Now I chose this particular theme for the reason is that the WI are famed or known for all their handicrafts, all their jams and other things that they make. And seeing as my whole process which was what I was doing for my degree portfolio, was all handmade. My camera was handmade, all my plates were handmade, the processes were handmade, the printing was handmade. So this is why I photographed women who are known for making handmade objects. That was the connection with the women. So I had to produce 15 portraits, and these are a few of them. Then eventually, when I had my degree show, which was in a large artists exhibition space called the Truman Brewery, which is in Shoreditch, and that I was up there for a week, and I presented all the plates, the original plates. And these are two of the women standing next to the portraits. They came up to see the exhibition, and they were standing next to their portraits. So this is the picture of Emma, which was I did very well in, with 2 big international competitions. This was actually the photographs, the plates, the prints actually in the exhibition itself. To actually get into one of these exhibitions, especially the RPS one, is extremely difficult. To say that I was a finalist in an RPS exhibition, I'm quite pleased about that. But I've done quite well with quite a few other competitions. I won one of the Royal Photographic competitions the other year, 2018, for gardens. And this is a photograph you see here of Royal Horticultural Society's garden, Hyde Hall. This is their rose garden, which I entered, and I won the competition. And the RPS liked it so much they used this image as the landing page image for their website, which I was quite pleased about. And I've done quite a lot of work for the RPS here and there over the years. The guy on the right, this is Matthew, and he's one of the head gardeners. He specialises in fruit and veg. And this is you can see his prize-winning pumpkin. This is when his pumpkin was quite small. It actually grew to something like about 1,400 kilos in the end. It was huge when it was finally put on show and weighed. Anyway, this is him in the patch where the pumpkin was growing, and he was very pleased with this image. He said to me many times, this is the best portrait he's ever had of himself. Another one on the right is some of the head gardeners at Hyde Hall. They all stood for a line-up, and Hyde Hall have been in contact with me, and they want me to hold an exhibition of some of my work sometime soon, although with the recent coronavirus outbreak, it's probably going to be put back to next year now. But I've done a number of portraits for people over the years. On the left is a friend of mine called Keith. He's a very young 84-year-old. He lives in Southend, Essex, and he has quite a few Harleys, which he rides around everywhere. And this is how Keith looks at normally every day. You only see him with his silk top hat, his sunglasses, he's always got a cigarette in his hand. The guy in the middle is a guy called Ralph. He was one of my tutors at university, and he asked me to do his portrait for him. And I did his portrait in his back garden. You can see the smaller photograph at the top right that's showing the setup of how it was all put together. And I do quite a lot of indoor still life. It's not easy to do. You have to use a lot of light. The downside of this process, doing wet clothing, is it has to be very long exposures. And these were 2 recent still lifes. They were both 6-minute exposures. I think they were both 6-minute f/22. I've recently been doing, it's not unusual for me to do 12-minute exposures. So last year I entered a competition for the Royal Horticultural Society for their London summer show, and I had to do 6 photographs, portfolios, 6 photographs, which I entered. And I was very surprised to be actually selected, invited to go to the show. And then when I exhibited there, I was even more surprised to win one of their very coveted medals. I won a silver gilt medal, and they're about as rare as hen's teeth. So one of my one of the projects which I've just finished is I live in Acton, which is just north of Sudbury. Just across the road from me, there's a very pretty little church. And I've been going up to this church on the first day of every month at 11 o'clock, putting the camera in the same position and taking the same picture of the same view to show the seasons as they've unfolded. And you can see here the top left here, that's February. Next one is March. And then the next one over here is April. It's quite dramatic how different it changed in only a month. The leaves suddenly came out, and the bottom two, I think that was August and September, to show how the summer had progressed. Now I've finished this project now, and I'm giving all these images over to the local church. They want to use it to make a calendar to try and boost some sales for their roof fund. So I'm quite happy to give them the images for them to use. Another project I'm currently working on is Flatford Mill is not very far from me. It's only about 20 minutes down the road. Flatford Mill is where Constable used to live. And I'm going over there now and I'm replicating some of Constable's scenes where he painted, but I'm doing it in a modern context. Although I'm using a very old process, an old style camera, I'm using a modern context. I'm using modern materials and trying to replicate the scenes which he painted. You can probably recognise the one here on the left. That's Warlock's cottage of Constable's picture of the haywain. And the other two here these were taken at different times of the year, in the spring and then in the summer, also of different areas that Constable painted. The photograph, the image you see on the top right here of a picture of a bridge, you can probably see these two little white lines which are streaking along here. Now these were actually swans. They were swimming towards me. It was a 30-second exposure, and as they swam towards me, they sort of made these white tracks, which I thought was quite unique. I've left them in. Any of the marks which appear in these photographs, which I always do, you get marks in the emulsion when you're pouring them, I always leave in the photograph. I don't remove them. I don't try editing them. Everything is as was. This here is photographs of some roses. I did this photograph for my wife last year for Valentine's Day to try and photograph some roses for her. And it is without doubt the most difficult shot I've done to date. It took me a whole day to actually get the lighting right. It might not look very much, but this process wet collodion is extremely difficult to do and actually get a result which actually looks reasonably good. It is very basic compared to today's technology. So yes, this is still by far the most difficult photograph I've done to date. I'm now working on another project I started last summer where I'm photographing weeds in the hedgerow. And I'm now waiting for the summer to come so I can go out and find some more weeds. The one on the left you see is a dandelion, and the one on the right is cow parsley. Cow parsley is just one small bud of a cow parsley head. And I'm using my camera, I'm pushing it to the maximum. I'm trying to do macro photography with wet collodion photography. This is pushing things to the limit of what is possible for me to do. But I'm actually quite enjoying this process to see how far I can push it and take it along. Anyway, this is a photograph of me, my camera. This is how I normally look when I'm out and about. I have to wear an apron, a thick leather apron, to avoid splashes of chemicals, and I have to wear the usual rubber gloves. And you get the chemical, there's one particular chemical which is a little unpleasant, which is silver nitrate. The other chemicals are not too bad. They're not too dangerous at all. But it's the silver nitrate one which I have to be careful with. It's in liquid form. It has the potential to be dangerous, but with careful handling, it's not too bad. It's the dangerous side is when it's in its powder form, when it's in crystals. that is actually quite dangerous, and I have to use that. So I have to use face masks and goggles when I'm playing around with that. Anyway, that's the end of that particular presentation. What I wanted to move on to doing now is actually show you a little bit about, right, let's turn this off and go back to my screen. Can you see? Right, can you see the screen? I take it you can see the screen. Right, right, got your camera. Right, I want to show you the camera itself and how I use it. So I'm just going to move my laptop. Bear with me a second. I'll just move my laptop and reposition it into my lounge. Right now, just move this. Right, this is my camera which I use. It's quite large. It's a 10:8 camera. It weighs about 8 or 9 kilos, so it's not an easy, handy thing to use. You have to use it on a tripod all the time. It's not something you can hand hold at all. So I'll show you the back of it. At the moment, it's actually set up as though I was going to do a portrait setting. If I want to change it to landscape, I have to change the back off. Take the back off. This is here. This is the glass screen. It's actually a rectangle. Now, if I put it into landscape mode, I now be able to take a landscape photograph. Once you've made a plate and you've coated it, and you've made a coating in the darkroom, the plate is put into what's called a film carrier. And the film carrier is essentially a box which you can bring in and out, and the box, this film carrier, slides in the back behind, I don't know whether you can see this too well, but it slides in the back of behind this glass screen. So depending on how you got your glass screen, it's either a landscape or a portrait. I'll take this out and put it back into portrait. Doing this process, you have to use a lot of light. Photographs are very slow. On a sunny day, you might be doing a exposure of say 5 or 10 seconds at say f11 or f16 if it was a really sunny day. If you try and do photographs indoors, it's not easy to do. It's extremely difficult. You have to use a lot of light, and also the light has to be at the blue end of the spectrum. So you have to use lights which have got a Kelvin value of around about 5.5 Kelvin, 5,500 Kelvin or 6,000 Kelvin. They have to be daylight lights. And what I've been using these days a lot, I've been using indoor shots. I've been using a lot of LED studio lights. This is one here, and this is one of my smaller ones. They're all battery packs, and this is one, they're not too expensive. This is one of my smaller ones. This is, the color value is around about 5,500 Kelvin, but the lumen value is not that powerful. It's about 3,500 lumen. You really need lights 5,000–6,000 lumen. You're going to need quite a lot of them. So I have to use quite a lot of these lights to do a portrait. you can just about do a portrait indoors, but most of my portraits, it's much easier to do outside. Now these little lights, I don't know if you can see wherever I show you the camera, you can actually adjust the lighting a little bit. You can change the colors. You can make them more yellow or more red or more blue. I have to turn down the yellow on this, and so they're very, very blue, even though what you think here might actually be quite powerful for a normal studio light. These are not very powerful for me at all. So this is about 3,500 lumen, and I really need light in around about 12 to 18,000 lumen to be able to get a portrait indoors under 10 seconds. So I've got a number of these lights. I quite like using these ones because they're very adjustable. You can adjust the light output. They've got barn doors, so you can adjust them. And the battery packs on the back of them, they last about 5 hours. I've got other lights which I use. Another one here. This is not quite so adjustable, but it's more powerful. It's more blue. It's around about 6,500 Kelvin, and they're around about 6,000 lumen as well. Although this is much more powerful, it's not adjustable. I can't adjust how much light is coming out. So I have to use a combination of different lights whenever I'm doing studio work or still life. And then I made myself another light. I put one together. This is the most powerful light which I have. This one here, I bought the basics off Amazon and then wired it all together. This is actually 12,000 lumen and it's 6,500 Kelvin for color temperature, which is very good to use. But if you point this at somebody and trying to take a portrait, it kind of blinds them. It's not an easy light to use, but it is the most powerful one which I have. I usually use this as an overhead light pointing downwards. So what I'm going to do is try and show you how I actually do a photograph, a portrait. I'm going to use my wife as a model, and this is my lovely Jill. So, where's Jill? She's right. Let's turn the camera a little bit. Right. So I'm going to use Jill as a model. Right. To show you how it works. So, start by pointing it at you. All right. First of all, I'm going to start bringing in the various lights. Right, let's bring in the big powerful one first of all. This, I can't shine directly at her, it will blind her. This one is not powered on the battery pack, it's powered by mains. Sorry about this. I'll just raise this up as high as you can. All right, you can see Jill's not liking this too much at all, but you need to have this amount of light. I've worked out the rough speed of the emulsions which I make. And if you were to get a light meter and set your light meter, which is what I use, I have a small handheld light meter, one of these things. And if I set it to its lowest setting, which is ISO 3, then the speed of the emulsion is roughly 5 stops slower than that. So I can actually work out what the exposure is to give at any particular time. It's very hit and miss, but I can actually get some idea of what to do. Sorry about this, Jill. I know you're not quite liking this bright light, are you? Right. So let's put another one here. Sorry about this. Whoops. Right. So You open the lens first of all. You can actually see what you're doing. And you can move the lens backwards and forwards until you get an image. The jewel is upside down and back to front at the moment. And to get to work on getting the process right, you have to use a cloth. You've probably seen people doing this. You have to put a cloth over the top of your head, over the camera, to actually make it dark to be able to see what it is you're focusing in on. You focus in on the glass screen, and when you've got it right, with the composition, what you want, and it's in focus, then I go off to make my plate, which would be in a darkroom. It takes probably a quarter of an hour to make one of these plates. And I come bring the plate back in this little box called a film holder. It goes into the back of the camera. If I was to bring my laptop towards you, I don't know whether you will see, it's worth trying out. I don't know whether you will see the image on the back of the glass screen. I don't know whether you can see this. This is Jill upside down, back to front. I don't know how effective this is going to be, but I wanted to show it to you. See what happens. Yeah, you can see that, can you?
Yeah, just about that, yeah.
Right, so this is what you see on the back of the screen, and it's much easier to see when it's got the cloth over the top of your head. Right, I'll turn these lights off because I don't want to blind Jill too much. Right. Okay. So this is the process which I do. So this is my camera. I want to show it to you in a little bit more detail. Let's use one of these lights. More illumination. Okay. Yeah. All right. So this is the camera itself. You have at the front here, you've got the base plate, which you can move backwards and forwards. You've got a center section here, which has got you can actually pull this out. You can extend the bellows further, and you can actually twist the lens one way or another. And you can adjust the height of the lens. You can either adjust the height, or you can swivel it backwards and forwards if you're trying to avoid a parallax. Now I want to change a lens, so I've got two of these lenses. Lens comes on a lens board. So the lens is like this. So this is my 180 lens. They're about 400. They're about 400 second hand. I get them off eBay. They come in from Japan, and they work quite well. So it's what I do want to show people is what I actually produce. It might not be easy to show, but I'd like to give it a go anyway. This process, the plates which I produce, are very delicate. So whenever I'm handling the actual final plate, I have to use cotton gloves. It's very easy to damage them. Right, you can make either two different types of plates. One's a metal plate, which is called a tin type, or you can make a glass plate, which is called an amber type. Although I've stopped using glass now, I'm now actually moved over to using Perspex. It's much easier to use, and also if you drop it, it doesn't shatter. This is a still life which I've done. I actually find doing the amber types much easier to use. I've no idea whether you're going to be able to see this here in the light, but to look at these, they look under a direct light, under a direct sunny light, they look they glow. It's about the best way I can describe them to them. They have an ethereal quality. You actually have it's a silver, the image is silver. So when you put it under direct light, the silver reflects the light and you see the image, and they sort of glow. I much prefer doing these. These are much easier to do than the tintype. But I'll show you the same image. That's one image. This is exactly the same image. This is a tintype. I don't know whether you can actually see this very well, but this is how most people have seen these type of wet collodion images as tintypes. I don't actually like doing these. The quality you get from them is limited. You don't quite have the whole tonal range you can get from if you're shooting on glass. But this is how most people will know of a wet collodion image from what's called a tintype. It's actually blackened metal, or this is blackened aluminium, which you coat, and then it's developed up, and this is like your final print. So this is the plate of this friend of mine called Keith, the very old 84-year-old biker. I don't know whether you can actually see it or not, but I'd like to see if I can show it to you. You might see the image or not.
Yeah, it's not too bad if you just, that's it.
Right.
Bit further forward, bit more. That's it, lovely. See
Right.
that?
So they're sort of transparent, these images, these amber types. They're, in a way, they're almost a bit like a hologram, because you can see through them and you can see the image, and you can also see through them. And if you're showing them in a bright light, they really glow, they shine. So that's my friend Keith. So this is not an easy process to do, but I quite like doing it. I can really understand all the problems which go wrong with it. There's a lot of problems which do happen, mostly to do with actually making the coating. You first of all have a sheet of glass, what I use, or perspex, and then you have to coat it by hand with collodion, and the actual coating is an art form in itself. And then the plate is dipped into a bath of silver nitrate for 3 or 4 minutes to sensitize it, and then the plate is then put in the back of in the film carrier and taken into your camera. Once you've mixed up the chemicals, you're on the clock here. The chemicals are starting to degrade, and once you've mixed them up, you've got about 15 minutes before they degrade and you lose your image. So wherever you go, you have to make your image there and then, take the photograph, and then develop it up straight away. So if I'm on location, I have to take a portable darkroom with me, which is it's quite a large, it's a tent that I use. It's a hydroponic grow tent, which I bought off eBay for about 50 quid. And it's big enough for me to get into. It's big enough to put a development table in there and all my trays, and I can get in there. It takes me about an hour to set this up, and then when I'm going home, it takes me about an hour to clean up. So there is a logistics nightmare in actually trying to do this process, especially on location somewhere. But when it works and when it goes well, I think it's worth doing. When the pictures eventually you get a good image, then I think the effort you have to put into it is worth all the effort. But it might not be everybody's cup of tea. But I certainly don't mind doing it. If anybody is interested in learning how to do the process, I'd be more than happy to run some demos or workshops sometime later on in the year. Probably that will probably be done at my house here. So if there's any club members who are actually interested or actually want to have a go at doing this, I'm more than happy to show everybody how to do this. So I'd like now to move on to if anybody's got some questions. What's they'd
Yeah,
like? Questions
look in
about question and answers.
yeah, if you look in the chat, there's a few. You got a few questions in there.
Right. I'm just going to sit back down again.
If you scroll down to Peter Benson, he's got the first question when you get in the chat there.
Wait a second. Where's the Chris? Where you say it's somewhere at the bottom? Do you say?
Yeah, if you scroll about 2/3 of the way down, come to Peter Benson. His is the first question in the list.
Where's Peter? I can't. Oh, I see. What do I do? Just I've got PB.
No. Click on the little chat bubble. The top.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that'll expand.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, scroll down there to Peter Benson.
Right. Just scrolling down. Right. Okay. Right. It's asking about moving the lens up and down, side to side of your cameras. Is this the same as tilt and shift? Yes, it is. It is. It is tilt and shift. You're moving the whole lens. Most large format cameras, they can do tilt and shift of the front of the lens, and also you can actually move the back where you put the glass screen in, where at the back of the glass screen where you put the dark slide in. That can actually move up and down. This particular camera has only got one tilt and shift, which is on the front of the lens. Hope that answers that question. Right, Paul, next one is, does the camera have a single lens or a compound system like a modern camera? No, it's just got a single lens. What you saw in the image there, it's the lens is it's a multiple element lens. It is a modern lens. It's not that old, so it's a second-hand lens from Japan. It's a modern Fuji lens, and I didn't want to use very old lenses. I wanted to try and do it gets as best an image as I possibly can using a modern lens. Right, Lawrence, where did I get my bellows from? Right, I found a lot of the parts. I got them off the internet, and I got the bellows. There's actually a company in Solihull in Birmingham, which is making bellows. There's still a lot of people who use large format cameras, especially 5.4s. So there's still a market for making bellows. So yes, it wasn't too difficult, although I had to go and drive to get the bellows. And it was a hundred of quid or something. I can't remember exactly how much it was. But yes, you can still get bellows. Right, Robert, you said, did you say you entered the image of the girl in the national competition? It was in, entered into the RPS 160 IPE exhibition, which anybody can enter into, and it's not a particular category. It's a general category. And that was for both competitions, for the RPS and also for the AOP. That was the AOP Open competition, which I entered the picture of Emma in. Right, Chris, so you're saying the ISO is 0.09375. Well, didn't realize it was as low as that. And yes, Jackie, yes, Jill is she's now sitting away from the lights, and I don't often ask her to sit for me. Occasionally when I'm just playing around and just trying out new chemistry, she does sit. But I try and do all my portraits outside or during daylight hours rather than doing it in at night time. It's extremely difficult to do it using studio lights. Oh, and also keeping still. Jill's just saying that you'd have to keep still for 10, maybe 20 seconds. So how many of you can actually keep still and not move at all for 10 or 20 seconds? You can blink, but you can't actually move. Right, Lawrence, how long can you keep a plate between making it and using it? Right, once you've made the plate, once you've mixed the chemicals and coated it, as I said earlier, you're on the clock. The chemicals are starting to degrade. The chemicals must remain wet, which is why the whole process is called wet collodion. If the plate is allowed to dry out, then you lose your image and you can't develop it, which has a problem in the summer because it's very hot, and during the summer it probably goes down to sort of 7 or 8 minutes. But during the winter, when there's less light about, you can actually keep a plate in between making it and using it for a lot longer. So average is probably about 15 minutes. All right, Mick, you asked how I can only make one plate at a time because I've only got one plate holder. If I had an assistant, some sort of slave in a darkroom, making my plates for me, I could probably do photographs a lot faster. At the moment, I can make a plate, coat a plate, expose it and develop it. If everything's working well, I can do one plate, probably one every 20 minutes to half an hour. So it's not fast. And if I can do, say, 8 or 10 plates in a day, then I've done really well. Right, Ivan, what happens to the finished image when you twist them? Right, well, you have to twist and move the bellows to get the image. If you've got something which is, if you ever used a tilt and shift lens, this is exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to tilt and twist the lens so that every part of the image is actually in focus. You try and photographing a tall building from the bottom, then the bottom is in focus, but the top of it will be out of focus. So Chris, you're asking about, is it a positive or a negative? Right, the actual image of what you look at on the plates, whatever it is, whether it's on a glass plate or a metal plate, is actually a negative. But if you have a negative, but you put it onto a black background and shine a bright light on it, it becomes a positive. Exactly the same with the metal plates. It's actually a negative image, but it's on a black background. Again, it looks like a positive. So I can actually, the glass plates or the ambrotypes, I much prefer using. I've got a friend who's got an enlarger big enough to take my plates, and he can actually print them up if he wanted to, or I can make contact prints. But I much prefer to actually display the original plate because they're the ones which actually look silver. They're the ones which actually glow. Right, Robert, you're asking how to show the lens and how you adjust the aperture and shutter speed. Right, I'll just go and get the lens. I'll be back in a second. Right, this is my lens. The moment the shutter is wide open, as you can see it. If I was to shut it down, no, you can't see it. You have it wide open when you're photographing. On the bottom here, you've got a dial here, which you adjust the aperture. As you turn it round, the aperture closes up or opens up, setting to whatever it is. I usually try and do my photographs around about f11 or f16. If I'm doing still life, then I'll probably be setting it to f32, which you see is that's f32. That's actually quite small. The largest aperture on this lens is a 5.6. It does have a shutter speed. So this is a Fuji lens with a copal shutter on it, and I can adjust the speed from anything from T to 400th a second. At the moment it's set to T, So it's used, I usually use quite long exposures, so it's easy with using T. And then you have a bulb release, one of these little things. The bulb release screws into the side. And then when you prime the lens, you've got a little lever here, you prime the lens, you pull it over, drop the lens. Then using the bulb release, open it, count for how many seconds or minutes, and then shut it again. If I want to set it to say, I'd love to be able to do an exposure of as fast as say 1/4 of a second. I can't. Might think that's quite amusing, but to be able to do a photograph at 1/4 of a second would be amazingly fast. So that's the lens. Right. Right, Mick, yes, it is a lot of processing. It's a lot more than just normal black and white film developing and printing. But this is how photography started. This is where it began. This is the first mass process which allowed everybody to own a camera and start taking photographs, although initially it was only the rich who were able to do it. Around about 1890, most people were able to afford to buy these cameras or have them made and start taking photographs. Ian, you ask about, can you use a plate once? Yes, you can only use a plate once. Once you've made it, once you've coated it, that's it, you can't reuse it. So yeah, so I've got through an awful lot of plates. I've got stacks of old ones which are no good. And eventually I do the really old ones which are useless, I do chuck away. But I do have quite a lot of boxes of plates around the house. So Kerr, you asked about how I work out the exposure. Right, I'll just go and get my light meter. I've got this simple Staconic light meter, it's an old light meter, and I set the ISO, the lowest setting is ISO 3, and I can, knowing how to set it, that I can actually take a light reading, and then using this I take a light reading, and then I have to work backwards from this light reading. Whatever I take from here, I have to work roughly 4, maybe 5 stops backwards. It is a long drawn out process. I do sometimes have to resort to using a computer or a calculator to work things out. One of my main tools, which I use an awful lot, is my mobile phone. I use this an awful lot with my photography, partly because so many things going wrong. I'm always writing notes on it wherever I am. I'm writing a note on it about what I've done and how I've set it up. And then I take a photograph of the camera and the settings of how everything's set up. And I've also got a timer on here as well, which if it's like 5 seconds, 10 seconds or 6 minutes, quite easy to use. So this is so important for me. It's one of my most important tools which I use for my photography is my mobile phone. It does everything. It does all the calculations I need. I've got a timer. I can write my notes on it and take photographs of the setups. So that's an indispensable tool. Right, you're asking who's the next one down? Chris, is it standard fitting on the lens? So could I get a new lens for my camera? Right, this is these lenses, these lens boards, they all come in different sizes for different cameras. This is a lens board which I made myself. You buy the lens and then you adapt the lens to the lens board which fits onto the camera. So this is a Copal 0 shutter with a lens. I've got my other lens is a Copal 3 shutter unit with the lens which is built into it. I can't really describe it to you other than you'd have to come and actually see what this actually looks like. Right. All right, Chris, you asked, am I going to keep this project? Well, absolutely love doing this type of photography, and I'm going to carry on doing it. I really understand it. Yes, it is a pain in the neck to do. I do actually still do digital photography, but I much prefer doing this type of photography. At the end of the day, it's what I want from an artistic point of view. You have to think what you're doing. You have to be very careful every time you take a photograph, because it takes so long to actually make the plates and actually process it. You have to think very carefully about what you're doing. And if you screw up, you're about half an hour back before you can actually go back and try and recreate it. Uh, Working with an image on the glass screen, which is upside down and back to front, again, you have to think very carefully about what it is that I'm taking a photograph of, rather than just have a digital camera. I can just point and press and shoot 200 or 300 images in a few minutes. This I can't. I can do one plate about every 20 minutes, half hour. Right. Joe, you talked to a lithographic company who used a gallery camera. Right. Oh, so you know what a gallery camera is. Right. I don't know what a transphototone is. I don't know what that is. Oh yes, you used to paint out the light marks and scratches. Yes, it's called spotting. Ah yes, I've had to do lots and lots of negs spotting that out. Yes, it's one of the things I had to do as an apprentice. Ian, you asked about the plates. Is it expensive to do? Yes, it is reasonably expensive to do. Every time you make a plate, it's probably, on average, for materials alone, is £4 or £5 a time. The actual plastic is about 150, 180 a time, and then the chemicals themselves. Although the silver nitrate you can actually reuse, you can regenerate the silver nitrate. That's around about £120 a litre, and I have to use a litre at a time. But you can reuse the silver nitrate. The other chemicals are just one-shot chemicals you have to use once and then thrown away. The other chemicals which I use are not that dangerous. In fact, the developer, the main constituent of the developer is ferrous sulfate. It's mainly made of ferrous sulfate and acetic acid. Ferrous sulfate is the main constituent in an awful lot of garden fertilizers. So with the used developer, I usually pour it on the roses and as a fertilizer, and they seem to be doing quite well out of it. Although the silver nitrate, I don't dispose of that. I just re-energize that and reuse it. Although it is quite a difficult process to do, and that's actually quite a bit dangerous. I have to sort of have a lot of masks and goggles for doing that one, but it saves having to spend a lot of money on expensive silver nitrate. Right, I think that's probably about everything I've got to say to everybody. Any more questions?
Steve, that was so interesting. You brought back memories of what you're doing. I've actually seen very similar to that where I used to work. So that's why I asked you if you knew about Transitone, because we had the big bellows and the big cameras, and we previously screened material. Obviously, you're doing originals, but just seeing what you're doing now, that brought back all, that camera is a miniature of what my bosses was on a 10-foot runner. That's how big our yeah, you see, this is brilliant.
That's what I used to use as a gallery camera. I used to use a Little John gallery camera. It was huge.
Fantastic. Oh, that was amazing. I don't know if anyone else wants to make comments on that, but that was so interesting. I thought I might fall asleep. I thought I might be bored, but no, it's absolutely amazing. Thank you. Really good.
Very good.
I'd like to offer to anybody in the club I'm quite happy to demonstrate it to them. If people would like to come around, and I won't be charging or anything for this. This is for club members. If you want to sometime, I'll put a posting on the Facebook or let people know. If anybody's interested in actually learning how this is done or actually seeing it, then I'm more than happy to do this. We'll be down at my house We can always organise it one afternoon, and people can see how a wet plate is made, and maybe even give them a chance to make one or do a portrait. Although, if I'm actually doing workshops, I'll only do 3 people at a time. My liability insurance only covers me for doing workshops for 3. Although I'll quite happy demonstrate it to larger groups of people, say 10 or 15 people. So if anybody's interested, Joe, put it around and try and organise it. See, people can see how photography actually started. Anyway,
Brilliant.
I better let everybody go off and have a cup of tea. I don't want to bore you too much. I hope it's been an interesting talk for everybody and an insight in what I get up to.
Yeah,
Hey, thanks, Steve. That was very interesting.
yeah. I'm sure everyone says the same. I think it's, that was super.
Well,
Take
I'd
us
love to
out of our
hear.
comfort zones as well. It's super.
Yeah, I'd love
Brilliant,
to hear.
Steve. Thank you very much.
Anybody wants to send me some feedback of what they thought or anything, just put it on Facebook or send me an email or a message. I'd love to hear what actually happened, what people thought. Yes. Anyway, better let you all go and have a cup of tea or something, and then Dale will be on sometime soon.
Excellent. Thank you.
Oh,
Joe will be back just after 9.
Right,
Don't
okay.
go too far, folks.
Right.
This conference will now be recorded.
I'm going to go through sort of the various things I've done over the years, and that sort of enable me to have fun and learn along the way. And hopefully will be some things that you've seen before, but there will be some new things depending on how long you've been at the club. Right? So I've divided it in a couple of sections. The first section won't require really any use of Photoshop, so it can be used on your camera, the camera settings, and perhaps some odd other pieces of equipment. Feel free to ask questions along the way. It may get a bit tricky if everybody tries to talk. So if you use the chat box and sort of just write a cue in there, I can ask you sort of when I'm ready, if you like. So first thing I'd start with is quite a straightforward one, which most people, or quite a few people, have had a go at, as the intentional camera movement. This is quite a straightforward one that I've done of a birch tree and just moving the camera in a vertical up and down position. The camera is just set at 0.4 of a second shutter speed, so that gave enough time to show some of the movement as I moved the camera up or down, whichever way I wanted to do it. Effects can vary quite a lot, and it's a lot of trial and error in this. Similar, if you want to do a horizontal movement, this is the beach at Wells, and I panned the camera along the beach with a reasonably slow shutter speed there of 1/50th of a second, and it really simplified the detail. But because there's lots of lines, it looks quite effective, I think, as there's lots of lines and different colours, shades of brown. And I think that's probably one of my best ICM pictures. A slightly different one here. This one's a field of poppies that came out, and I moved the camera up or down to give that little bit of a different effect. There's lots of, there's a lot of trial and error in this, and getting the shutter speed just long enough for you to get that bit of movement is perhaps the tricky bit. And it doesn't need to be as long as a second, but it's slower than you would normally use to get a still picture. So you certainly want it slower than 1/100th of a second to do this. If it's a really bright day, you might want to put a filter on to give you a longer shutter speed. So something you can do in camera is a double exposure. I think most cameras have that as an option now. Something I haven't done a great deal of, but this is a double exposure. Joe was sitting on a seat for one picture, then I took a picture of, looks like some clematis leaves. Gives some interesting effects, and there's certainly some excellent versions of this you can see online if you want to look into how to do it and sort of give your ideas. And lens zoom, that's another in-camera effect you can do. Line your camera up on the subject, and as you press the shutters, zoom the lens in and out. There's a bit of trial and error again on how long a shutter speed you need for this. So you need it long enough to enable you to sort of turn the lens in or out. This one was, say, 0.6 of a second. So it's not a massively long time. This one's a slightly longer time. The stained glass window, and it's quite a colourful effect. Certainly one to experiment with the next time you're in a church. So they were all things that you can do sort of fairly easily when you're out and about. Now, when you've got a rainy day, you can experiment in the kitchen sink. I mean, so I've got no specialist electronic equipment for doing this. I just set the sink tap a dripping, set my camera up on a tripod near the sink. There was a lot of trial and error. I think I took a few hundred shots to try and get a few which were in focus and showed a few drops. And I used a macro lens for this, f/29, so I had as good a depth of field as I could get, and 1/60th per second. So I'm not. So some of you may be thinking you need a fast shutter speed to catch the water. But say a 60th of a second is not very fast, but I used a flash to freeze the movement. So, got a question there?
Yeah, got a couple. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one comment.
Yeah. So, Ian, does that always have to be set on a tripod for these sets? So, the in-camera movement, talking about that, I saw handheld. So I've never used a tripod when I'm doing that. But I mean, if you want, depends how good your panning is, you could say. If you want to pan from left to right or up and down, and you don't want it to be a bit wobbly, then you'll get a straighter effect if you use a tripod. The then zoom, again, that's handheld. And I think that's a similar case there. If you want straight zoom lines, perfectly straight zoom lines, then on a tripod could give you that effect. If you want ziggly zaggly lines, wibbly wobbly lines, then hand hold it and use a longer shutter speed. The water droplets were on a tripod. And so I took a lot of pictures to do that, just over the kitchen sink. It always interests me just how the flash freezes motion. It's not something that you automatically think about. And this is what the next picture is. I was playing around in the back garden. There's quite a number of blue tits at nesting time in my back garden using the nest box. Went out there with me camera and a flash gun. Not the sharpest of pictures, but I was quite amazed at how that froze the wings on the blue tit. 1/125th of a second, which, you know, if you're doing birds in flight, you're gonna, I don't know, have a 500th of a second perhaps. So again, the flash has frozen the wings when it's gone off. And this is a mistake, a bit of an odd one here. It's say one Christmas had the girls round and we were trying to do some pictures in front of the Christmas tree with the party poppers going off, and Jess moved her head just at the wrong time or the right time, so it's not quite sure which is, I suppose it's frozen the head movement as her head has turned, so you've got the hair, and then that's carried on and taken the picture of her when she's been looking at the camera. It's most peculiar. It's the only one that came out like that. So just happened to move at the right time. But it shows you what odd effects you can get when you don't expect them. Again, that's all stuff you don't need lots of Photoshop to do. A little bit of light paint, and I don't know whether you've heard of spiro light painting. If any of you had a spirograph where you can draw sort of patterns by going around in circles with a pen and some plastic discs, it's sort of similar effects to this. So to do this, I hung a little LED light up from a light in the bedroom and had the camera underneath pointing up, and then to set the LED moving on the string, had a long exposure, 25-30 seconds. It was difficult to get the focus in, so I used an f/16, a smaller aperture. See the one on the right hand side I've set up, I think there's two lights there next to each other, and set them swirling around. But this is quite fun and quite a simple thing to do without any high-tech equipment. I think the little LED lights I used were off eBay for a £5, and they're actually ones that you clip on your fingers. Very cheap. Fireworks, something else you can have a go at without any high-tech equipment. So this one, it's a windy night, so I sort of added to the fireworks being blown across the screen, and I think I used a bulb exposure for this one. So I had the camera open, waited for the fireworks to go off. I timed it, I can't remember how long it was. It may have even been for while the fireworks were flying about in the air, and then closed the exposure once they finished. So I got the whole display of the firework going up in the air and banging. The next one is a slightly different version of fireworks. So I've gone from a long exposure to a 5-second exposure. And this is because I wanted to get some movement in the merry-go-round that was in the foreground. So with the fireworks, there's obviously a lot less movement. And this was really a bit of pot luck because I'm on Angel Hill when the fair was on. I think David Richardson was there with us as well, trying a similar sort of thing. And you didn't know when the fireworks were going to go off. So I was sort of just pressing my shutter and hoping a firework would go off, and did that quite a few times and managed to catch one or two. Again, now, and something I've come across in sort of the website, cross polarization or photoelasticity. This is all to do with polarized light and how it's seen in the camera. Some quite interesting effects. Polarized light is light that goes in one direction, and a computer screen emits polarized light. Is the light coming out of the computer screen as only going in one direction. So you can use that as one of your tools. So to take this picture, I set the computer screen up with a white background. I put a polarizing filter on my camera because that then sort of seems to change how the camera sees the light going through the glass. The plastic changes the light rays, so that gives all these odd colours. And if there's any sort of flaws in the plastic, it shows up as different colours. And that's something that you don't need. These I have tweaked them in Lightroom to give the colours, but you don't need to do loads of heavy editing again. This can be straight out the camera if you want. But spoons, forks, knives, I think the cheaper the plastic item is, the better, because they have more imperfections in them and they'll show more patterns. So they are all things that you don't need to do lots of editing with. Just your camera, filter, tripod, flash. So this section then, as I said, some using software. I mean, I use Photoshop, but I think most of the packages that you can edit photos in will have layers in. So I think most of you know what a layer is in Photoshop's basically the process of stacking photos on top of each other. So that you can then, if you think of a book, you've got pages one on top of another. And if you look at the top page, you cannot see the writing through it. But if you made one of the pages transparent, you could then see the writing underneath, and the top writing would interfere with the writing underneath. And that's how the layers in Photoshop work. And you can change the effect between the layers and how they work together. So start off with a simple use of layers. So last year there was a triathlon in the town that started at Bury Sports Centre, swimming, cycling and running. I mean, I stood at the roundabout near the college and the cyclists were trundling past, and must admit it wasn't very exciting to watch. It wasn't very exciting, the pictures I was getting out. The lady goes past on her bike and round the roundabout. Wow. So I tried to make it a little bit more interesting by adding the three together and getting a sequence. It's never going to be a competition winning picture, but it shows a bit more of what's going on. And that, as I say, that's very simple use of layers, one on top of the other, and just deleting the parts that overlap so that you can see the cyclist going round the corner. Went to the Grand Prix. I was lucky enough to go to that last year. First time I've ever gone. And I thought, I'm not going to compete with John and his pictures because they're fabulous. So, just try. The cars there are so colourful and bright. They're all shone up and glistening. I thought, I'll just make a scene with the cars all lined up. The background is just a pan shot of the track and the barrier and with the stand and the people, and sort of line the cars up one on top of the other. So this is what the layers look like in Photoshop. So you've got background as layer 1, and then each of these is a car. This is the layer mask, so I've deleted all the stuff around the car that doesn't want to be shown up to leave the car. So like that, you've just the white bit shows in each of these layers to show the car and everything underneath it. So you just have to move the cars around so they're not on top of each other. And this is what they call the blend mode. And this is all kept to normal, but you'll see later on I've used some others. Going downstairs, like everybody has a fascination about stairs and spiral staircases. How to make an interesting shot of stairs is not always very easy. These are the stairs in the Palace House in Newmarket. A museum was well worth a visit if you're got a spare afternoon. It's mainly horses, but there was a photographer. They do have exhibitions of photos there, which is why I went on this particular weekend. And I got this nice staircase, and Joe was walking down it. And as normal, I always take pictures of stairs when we go down. So I took 3 pictures. And then again, using simple layers, we've combined them together to get the person walking down the stairs, various places. Again, it's very similar to the Formula 1 cars. I've just deleted out the areas I don't want off 2 of the pictures, so you've kept the stairs from one of the pictures, and then the person shows through. It's quite straightforward use of layers, but it does give sort of an interesting effect. And I've seen other versions of this sort of thing where you've got the people actually moving as a bit of a blur. So if you can get that sort of a blurry person and a stationary person, that can sort of make it a little bit more interesting. And Foxton locks in the rain. This is wasn't expecting to see this Spitfire fly over, so I just had a 26 to 70mm lens on. It wasn't good enough to get super duper pictures of Spitfire, but I took lots of pictures as it flew over unexpectedly, and then combined them into this series. So exactly the same technique as the others. And the plane has got white speckles on it, which is the rain. I mean, that absolutely tipped down. We got soaked. All right, so this was when I was on holiday last year, stayed in a log cabin on a farm, and looked at Google Maps, and I was quite excited at the positioning of it, because it was looking down this valley which looked quite picturesque, and that was certainly a pleasant scene to look out onto in the evenings. And so I was hoping to get some nice sunsets. We were there the week and there wasn't one decent sunset. There was just no cloud, and the sun just went down with no effects, or there was too much cloud. It's just, I think, about the last evening we were there, and I used the time-lapse facility on the camera. So I think a lot of them, certainly the newer cameras, have it. You can set up in the camera how many pictures you want to take, when you want the picture to start, and how far apart the pictures are. So I set this up to take one picture every minute over an hour, I think it was. And, you know, I got 100 pictures like this, which were pretty rubbish as far as I was concerned. There wasn't the nice sunset I was hoping for. So anyway, I used some layers on Photoshop again. I combined the pictures. And this time, this has just got two of them in to show this blend mode. I changed that to lighten. So what that does is, where you've got, if you think this is a cloudy scene, the clouds are moving across the sky over that hour, changing position, and these light areas will move. And I mean, with these two pictures, you can't see the very much movement, but there'll be a slight movement. And by changing the blend mode to lighten, this light area on the pictures will shine through. The only problem is there was, I don't know, 60 or 70 pictures combined, which just is too many for my camera, for my computer. So I had to do it in batches of 20, and this is the sort of result you end up with. So you can see the movement across the sky of the clouds and the sheep wandering about in the field. And I thought that was a much more interesting effect than just the plain picture of a rather boring sunset. Obviously, I have tweaked the colours as well a bit to perhaps oversaturate it. I like colourful pictures, so I tend to oversaturate probably a bit more than some people would. And this effect can be really good if you've got enough movement in the sky and you take enough pictures. And I mean, this is, say, 60 or 80 pictures, I can't remember, it's quite a lot. And I have seen pictures which just look fantastic with like 400 pictures, and that's just amazing, the effects you can get with the clouds going across the sky. This is a picture, it's been around a long while. I probably did this about 5 years ago. Again, this simple layer and two pictures added together. As my daughter took a picture of her face, then took a picture of her hands, and then blended them together. Obviously, I tweaked the eyes a bit because they're not quite that blue. She has got blue eyes, but not quite that blue. Again, simple use of layers and not a lot else. This one, it's not so easy to spot the use of layers. So reflections from the past. So I used it in a competition quite a few years ago now. It was taken at Anglesey Abbey, the main picture was, but I did use some layers to put these reflections in the lake. again, very simple use of layers, nothing too complicated. But that just sort of, I've seen odd things on the telly where I can remember one, there's a girl walks past a swimming pool and there's a ball bouncing in the reflection, but the ball is not bouncing where the girl is walking past the swimming pool. And that's quite strange. I think it was a spooky film or something I was watching. That sort of thing gave me the idea for that as something different. The judge didn't twig what it was to start with, and that wasn't until he sort of had a harder look, he spotted the figures because they are a bit subtle. Some of you will remember this from a couple of years ago. The use of a Sunday morning when it's tipping down with rain and you got fed up with doing all the hoovering. Nice picture of a banana. A nice picture of a lime. And a grape. And an apple. And you can put them all together. And you can have lunch if you want. But I prefer to add a teapot. Especially off the market in Bury. There's a nice stand near the old town hall, sort of where up the top of the market. They sell all sorts of bright pottery. Probably about £5 for that teapot, not too expensive, but they can all be added together. Again, simple layers, just one on top of the other, and position them in the right place. I did stretch myself to fit the apple in. That's probably the hardest part. Amazingly, somebody bought one of them at the first Apex exhibition we did. I wonder whether they've still got it on their wall. So, levitation, a workshop we did a couple of years ago. Some of you would have attended it. So again, use of simple layers. That's my back garden where the pond is. There's me having a rest. So I need these two pictures to be combined, to see. And I also took these irises at West Stowe, added them. Slightly more complicated picture than the previous ones because you've got to delete the stool or cut round me, and sort of ended up with me floating above the lake, found some butterflies, so not the usual ones we get in our garden, I must admit. The judge didn't like that in one of the competitions. He said I should have been fallen, so I've got to try and sort of put a zoom burst or something in to make it look as though I'm fallen.
And a reflection.
Yeah, well, I've done a slight dark line there. Perhaps that's too subtle. I don't know. That's my first attempt at sort of that sort of thing. That's quite pleased with that. Go on. So, other playing around with layers again. This one is at Brandon Country Park, the mausoleum. The trees behind, I took a number of tree pictures, and all I've done is, well, the more trees turned into mono, but the trees are, I changed the blending of the different layers, just playing around, and some of them came out colourful. So I just, as you do, play around. That's what I do in the evenings a lot of the time, is just play around with these sort of things. It's a load of rubbish on the telly. So one of those crazy mornings when I couldn't sleep, going back a few years ago, lunar eclipse. Don't get too many of them that are at the right time. So lots of different pictures of the moon as it was going through the eclipse stage. See, I wandered up the field on my estate to take pictures of this, and it was very lonely and dark, but that was quite pleasant. There's nobody around, nice and quiet, watching the moon go down for an hour. I think I'd get a better quality of picture now, as I've learned a bit more about how to take pictures of the moon, because that small size you can't sort of see, they're not that brilliant, but good enough for this. And that's one of my fascinations, as moon and the stars. Just captures the moment. So on something slightly more technical, one of the options in Photoshop, and I guess a lot of the other software packages have them as well, as various filters which do all sorts of effects. Now there's lots of different things. So I'll start off with twirl, which is one David Richardson found a few years ago, and that's quite a fascinating one. So that's the way you find it, and when you click on the twirl, there are various sort of settings you can play around with, but you can take some straightforward pictures of these tanks. Are actually as was ICI in Stowmarket, if you walk along the River Gibbon. PPG is called now, and they are actually that colour, amazingly. I think they have a different chemical in each tank. But if you use the twirl option, it twirls them about. Makes lots of pretty patterns, nice and colourful. Another one's to try these in the light shop down Abbeygate Street. I'm not sure whether they're still hanging up there, but yeah, it's not a very exciting picture. Some strange pictures of glass. But when you play around with the twirl option, it gives quite an interesting effect. And as I said before, I like colourful things, so certainly is that. But the difficulty is sometimes finding a picture you can try these effects out on. It can be a bit of trial and error. Some pictures work better than others. Another effect I do love to play with, I think this is one of my favourite effects, is say the polar coordinates. Again, there's various options inside that option what you can play around with. Some work better than others. So this is a very straightforward picture that I took on one of our evenings out with a group of us. So yeah, it's a nice picture of Auction Street with a few lights, but you add the polar coordinates filter to it, and if you watch this post and try and imagine in your head that this spins all the way round and ends up over here, you get that.
Oh yeah, very good.
And yeah, that's the difficulty is with these is trying to imagine the pictures that work and those that don't, because this one works quite well. I think that's got a nice effect, but others just don't. So then that is quite a simple, just plugging the picture in to that filter option and it does the business. Slight variation on this one, and Again, this was taken on one of our evenings out, looking down the side of the Debenham shop across to the Apex building. So I then used the horizontal flip, is it? So we get a mirror image. It's just in itself quite an interesting picture. And if you then use the polar coordinates filter on that, you end up with this wacky picture. It's a strange architectural building. Again, I like these sort of wacky pictures. If you remember the Athena pictures from the 80s, don't think you really see them about now. They used to fascinate me. So that's the nearest I've got to this sort of thing. Similar picture here. This was taken probably 7 or 8 years ago. I took this picture. Quality is not brilliant. Certainly could be improved on. Again, I flipped it to give you the mirror image, and then I created an apple. That's how the polar coordinates treated that one. Turned it into an apple. And not everybody sees an apple when they're looking at this. But depends on your imagination, I think. So another very useful option in Photoshop, and will be in all other packages as well, is dodging and burning. So in Photoshop, it's find the hand which is a burn. And the way to remember which does what is when you burn something, it goes black. So it's darkening. And the dodge is the opposite, that's lightening. But within the function, you need to pick what you want to darken. So in the burn option, which that's set on at the moment, that's going to darken highlights. But you can darken mid-tones, or you can darken the dark bits. And similar on the burn, the dodge, you can lighten highlights, you can lighten dark bits. It's quite a flexible tool for bringing out, I've found it useful on a few occasions for bringing out detail. And this is the full moon, which some of you would have seen at the beginning of the year. So this was the shot almost straight out of the camera with nothing done to it. An okay picture of the moon, but it can be improved on quite dramatically with the dodge and the burn tool. So you're making the darker areas a bit darker, so you're dodging the darker areas, and sorry, get that right around, burning the dark areas and dodging the light areas, so you're getting a bit more contrast. Just using the contrast option on this will not work because there's not enough of a contrast between the light and the darks. It is the dodge and the burn tool bring out the detail much better. I think Paul has done a bit of a workshop on dodging and burning.
We've covered a bit in critique evenings, that type of thing, yeah.
Yeah, but this is a good example of why you use software, because straight out the camera just doesn't give you that detail. So this I don't know whether any of you come across the Josty effect, but that's something that sort of quite fascinated me for a while. And I haven't actually found how to do it easily in Photoshop. I mean, all the stuff I do, I'm not one for spending 2 days working on something. It's one evening, which might be a couple of hours at max, and that's sort of as long as I spend. If I can't do it in that time, then I got bored and fed up. So the Drosty effect is basically having a picture inside a picture, and it comes from this cocoa tin, where which the Dutch brought out, say, quite a few years ago, and that tin there has got the same picture of the lady on it, and that's sort of where the name has come from. And so this first picture, my wife and daughter not looking very excited about me taking a picture at one of the houses we visited. And if you watch this part, you'll see the effect coming in. As it's a picture inside a picture. Just a bit of fun, really. That never-ending mirror effect that you can get. And now this one I think is even better. One of the rooms, I take pictures of the rooms when I'm going round, as most people do, and you think, yeah, that's not a very exciting picture. What can we do with that? And nice picture frame there with some bright flowers, nice and colourful. And so you can end up with a never-ending picture of flowers. That amazes me how these sort of things work. It's some genius has written a little program to do that. Again, it's finding the pictures that will work on. You know, I've gone through quite a few pictures to find things that.
There's a quick question from CCD saying, how do you do that? This is CCD asking, so there you go, you've baffled him.
Baffled, hooray!
Yeah.
1 house point. Well, it's not in Photoshop, see, that's the problem, Chris. And this slide will show you. So it's free software called Photospiralalysis. And you can also make patterns with it. Yeah, so make a note, everyone. That's free. You haven't got to download it. It does take a bit of getting your head around how it works, because you know, you'll spend an evening figuring out how it works, and then you'd be spending another evening trying to find photos that works on. But this is, if you remember this from Chapel Field in Norwich, there's one of the upstairs bits. There's a little, I think it's a coffee place behind here. This is all coloured glass. I like to look at it, like bright colours again, but wasn't a very exciting picture, so I ran that through there and made some patterns. And this is a screenshot of the website, and these are the options that you go through. So once you've got the website up, you can open your file. This one's set to Thailand. I haven't managed to make the others work very well. You can zoom in and zoom out with this magnification. Spirals, it says there's only 2, and I haven't really worked out how that counts the number of spirals. That's most peculiar, but again, you can play around with all these options to make pictures, and there's hours of fun if you want to spend hours piddling about. Which, if we're self-isolating, we might have hours of fun to do this sort of thing.
We certainly will.
Yeah. So coming towards the end, this is a couple of little bits that, again, I always take my camera with me whenever I go out, but I also have my phone with me, and I don't use my phone enough. So the difference between time lapse and hyperlapse, I think most people will have heard about time lapse. Hyperlapse is very similar. I mean, I had the time lapse. You can set up the camera and it tends to be in one place and take a number of pictures over a period of time. Hyperlapse, if I go into camera on my Android phone, there's an option there called hyperlapse, and I think it basically takes lots of pictures and puts them together into a little movie. But the main difference between time lapse and hyperlapse that I can work out is with the hyperlapse you can move about, so you can be taking this series of pictures while the camera's moving. I was just gonna click onto show the difference if we can get this to go. So this is a time lapse set up which I set up in the garden. Just had the camera on a tripod, watching the meteors. I was hoping to get some shooting stars, and you'll see there's the odd one flashes by, but that's quite a cloudy night. And so this is about an hour's worth of pictures. There you go. 194 pictures taken a minute apart, so it's a bit more than an hour. And I left the camera out in my garden overnight to take that. I made sure it weren't going to rain beforehand. So that's a time lapse. There's no, apart from the stars going round, there's no movement. The camera stays in the same place. Get out of this. This one is a hyperlapse. Ooh. So and taken on the phone, that's a speeded up version. You can set the speed. And the boat goes in, lock gates shut, lock gates open. Got to let the water out. Boat goes out, bridge comes down. That's that Alton Broad, that one. So it's very similar, time lapse and hyperlapse. That's that whole difference between them. And this one, I thought I'd show this. This is a bit of fun. This is a hyperlapse that my wife took on her Android phone. This shows the amusing side of it. So the last thing I wanted to do is just mention AVs. A number of years ago, we had a competition for AVs, which stands for audio visuals. I mean, they are a mixture of photos and music, and you need a lot of pictures, all of one theme, to make it all sort of go together. So you need 60 or 70 photos to make about 3 minutes. So that's when we had the competitions, we never had a massive amount of entries. I think because of the one, you've got to have so many photos that all go together on one theme, and two, the time it takes to put it together. Because you think that takes a long while to mount a picture, well, it takes 10 times longer to make an AV. And so this is one I did, say, for 2012-13. So that was just so put together in Windows Movie Maker on a Windows 7 machine.
Dale, they're asking, was that supposed to be silent?
No, I could hear music on mine.
Ah, right, okay. There was a problem then. We didn't hear any music, but never mind.
Oh right. Oh dear, that's a shame. That's the
We'll have
best
to look
bit.
at. Yeah, we'll have to look at that one.
Yes. Yeah, I suppose that's the only thing that's had sound to it, apart from my voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was it then. So that's the end. If anybody's got any questions.
Lovely, thank you very much. If you can you unshare your screen and then make me presenter again, then we'll go see if anyone's got questions and then sort of go from there.
Yeah, I've got to click on somewhere here, haven't I?
Yes, click on the screen icon at the bottom.
Screen icon at the bottom. It's up to. I've got lots of people.
That's it. Then you go to people, right click on me and make me presenter.
All right. Oh, you must be up top, right? All right, there you go. Yep, there you go. I should be there.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Excellent. There we are. Right.
That's it.
Thank you very much, Dale. Very good. Keep this for a while. Yes, very good. Right. Any questions before we hand over to Peter for a minute?
What can I say? What a captivating evening it's been. And I've personally got to thank Steve and Dale for being the guinea pigs and doing this under such difficult situations. And looking at some of the comments, you guys have done well. I'm proud to be in the same club as you. And I've got a few ideas for the future that have come out of this. So watch this space. Now I'll pass over to Joe, who's going to close the meeting.
Hi, everybody.
I was brief.
Pardon? You were brief. All right. Yes, that makes a change, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay. You've said exactly what I wanted to say. What a brilliant evening. There's nothing on the telly, and I think this has really captivated all of us. And I've been writing down here all things I want to now try. Twirl and dodge and burn, and this photo, was it spiralysis or whatever it is, and to make patterns. I mean, what brilliant ideas. Then there's 34 of us on here tonight. Hopefully another time there'll be more. Not everyone's got all the facilities to do it all the time. But you've just passed our camera evening like it normally would. It's fantastic. So thank you so much, and thanks everyone for sort of tuning in on it. And lots of ideas that people have put down there. So I don't know if you want to look at any of them, Dale, to answer any of them. You want to have a quick look, Dale, before we go?
I think Paul pointed out the questions as they went through, didn't they?
Oh, okay. As long as you're happy, yeah.
I was the director.
I've got a question.
Go on then, Jen.
No, it's Jackie.
Oh, Jackie, sorry, I thought that sounded like Jen. I wasn't looking.
It's all right. This one's just for Dale. Would you like a cup for your teapot?
Yeah.
I like it.
The same song.
If you need to borrow it for another shot, just let me know.
Yeah.
I think being guinea pigs that you've both done tonight, to sit and do that in front of everyone, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of work setting all that up. So Really, really fantastic. You're amazing. Amazing people in our club. We're very lucky.
Thanks very much,
So thank
both of you. That's very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks
thank
to
you for
Paul and Peter for setting that up.
Yeah,
Great
definitely.
evening.
Yeah, absolutely. So we look forward to next week when we have
Yeah,
Pastor Furnace.
I have just to say, I have